Welcome to PyPod Chronicles, a series that brings our tech blog to life in a whole new way. Covering an array of topics surrounding Python and tech, from programming tips, best practices, and so much more. Let's get immersed in Python with the Nerd Nook on the go. You are listening to the top 1% of podcasts in the world. That's right. Well, kind of. The relevant fact here is there are around 2 million podcasts, but 90% of podcasts don't survive beyond their third episode. That means that nearly 2 million quit as soon as they start. So the top 1% of the world's most successful podcasts is made up of 200,000. That's it. Of which 90%, they're going to be dead by the time they reach 20 episodes. That leaves the final 1%. That's only 20% of podcasts that actually make it to 21 episodes. And I am stoked because this is my 21st episode. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of PyPod Chronicles. If you tuned into our latest episodes, you know that I'm on a series of teaching you how to master the fundamentals of Python. And in last week's episode, you dove into the second week of mastering the fundamentals, which was loops. And these are the same steps that I take my students through to help them get a good grasp on Python. After diving into loops last week, it's time to uncover the magic of creating your own functions in Python. Guys, functions are like the building blocks of a structured and reusable code base. So in today's episode, you're going to explore the depths of why and how we define functions, accompanied by a range of code examples that I hope I can talk you through. And by the end of this podcast, you'll not only understand the significance of functions, but also have a solid grasp on how to implement them as well. Guys, if you're new here, I have a free handcrafted guide that I've made for you. It's the link in the description. Head on down there and get yourself a free copy of that guide that you can use throughout these weeks of mastering the fundamentals of Python. The question is, why do we define functions? Well, functions in Python provide a way to encapsulate or hold a piece of code that can be reused multiple times throughout a program. A function is literally a reusable block of code you program once. If you think you're going to use something more than once, keep it in a function, store it somewhere, and then call it when you need it. You already know functions from working with Python these first 2 weeks. So think of it like print or input or int. Those are pre-programmed functions that someone else did for you. Well, now it's time to make your own functions, which you can call the same way. So functions really act as a container for your code that can be invoked whenever you need them. This eliminates the need to rewrite the same code blocks. So just think of a function as like a mini program within a big program, each performing a specific task. And by calling or using a function, you invoke the functionality without having to duplicate the code. So you know what a function is. Let's talk about how you define or create your own function. Creating functions in Python involves defining their structure, giving them any variables they might use in their mini program, and then also outlining their behavior. So, to create a function, you can use the def keyword, def, that's a Python keyword, followed by the name of your function. Be creative here. Do not use a pre-programmed Python function, followed by a set of parentheses. Now, in the first example here, you could define a function with no parameters. What is a parameter? Well, a parameter is like the variable you put inside the parentheses. It's like a variable that you can use within the function to do things with. So, for example, I could give my function a number. And then in the function, you could be like, if that number is greater than 10, do something, right? That number is a parameter that I could give my function. But we can make functions with no parameters. A function with no parameters is perfect for executing a set of actions or returning a fixed value. So if you have a fixed value that you're going to be constantly returning, you could create a function to hold that and then call it anywhere you need it. Now, where functions really come into play here is when we start accepting parameters. So let's just talk about a single parameter real quick. The parameter acts as like a dynamic component. It allows for your function to perform different operations based on a value that you provide it. This level of flexibility empowers you to create more versatile, but also these like adaptable functions. So like I said, think of a parameter as think of a parameter as a variable you can use inside the function. The value to this so-called variable is whatever you decide to pass or give your function. This time when you define a function, you can start the same exact way. Def, that keyword, with the name of your function. So for example, greet, then a set of parentheses. Inside those parentheses, I'm going to give it any parameters. So like I could give this a name. And then inside my function, I could just return hello, the string, with name. So if I give my function Josh, it's going to say hello Josh. If I give my function penguin, it's going to say hello penguin. The parameter inside the function acts as that variable and holds the value that you provided it when you use the function for that first time. You can use this parameter to customize the function's behavior. Now the same thing you just did and you learned with a single parameter, right? You can do with multiple parameters as well. So it's getting slightly more advanced now. In the world of Python, functions with multiple parameters allow you to tackle more complex tasks by accepting multiple inputs. These inputs are known as arguments, right? So when you create a function, those are parameters, whatever variables you put inside the parentheses. Later on in your code, when you want to use the function you defined, you then give it arguments. Arguments is like the live data that's given to the function that can be used within the function, simply put. So to define a function with multiple parameters, you do it the same exact way as a single parameter. Def, name of your function, this time you can just put multiple parameters inside the parentheses. Just make sure that each one is separated by a space. If you have two parameters, you must have two arguments. So for example, I define a function called like combine words. And this function takes two parameters, word1 and word2. Inside my function, I could say like combination equals word1 plus word2. Return combination. So this function is just adding together these two strings. Now, because I'm returning combination, when you use the return keyword in Python, you can use whatever you return as the value to a variable outside. So if my function is called combine words, outside my function I could say like result equals combine words, and I can call my function. Whatever the function returns is going to be the value to my variable result. So if I call my function and I say subscribe to the Nerd Nook, it's going to print off and it's going to say subscribe to the Nerd Nook because that's the value of the result variable. Creating functions with multiple parameters increases the complexity of your code, and it can handle and maintain its modular nature. These functions are particularly valuable for operations where multiple inputs influence the outcome of what you're looking for. So functions with multiple parameters can foster code reusability and also readability. Instead of rewriting intricate calculations, you can define your operation in one place, one time, and reuse it throughout your program. This approach minimizes errors, reduces redundancy, and it promotes really good collaboration with your coworkers, not to drive them nuts. Some questions that I get asked all the time by my students. Why are functions important in Python? Well, like I've said, guys, functions enhance reusability, readability, and maintenance. As a programmer, you are lazy. What can you do less of? Well, if you make a function once, then you can just reuse it. You can also call functions within other functions. This concept is known as function composition. It enables the creation of a complex process by combining simpler functions. So I can call a function I make within another function I make. Keep in mind you need to either print something from a function, but you can't do anything with that value, or return something. But if a function lacks the return statement, it automatically returns none. Let's wrap things up for today. So in the 21st episode, in the top 1% of podcasts, that's right, PyPod Chronicles, you've learned how to define and create your own functions in Python. Creating functions in Python is harnessing the power of code reusability. They transform complex tasks into manageable blocks of code, resulting in efficient, readable, and maintainable programs. From simpler functions with no parameters all the way to advanced functions accepting multiple parameters. Wow. All right, there we are. Guys, remember, I have a guide that I've made specifically for all my students that I'm giving to you for free. It's the first link in the description. Head on down and grab yourself a copy. And if you're looking at an online course, well, I have a beginner course taking you from zero to knowing with over 12 hours of content. It's essentially you having me in the classroom in a course. It's also in that link in the description. Well, for our 21st episode, the top 1% of podcasts, thank you guys for tuning in for the 21st episode of PyPod Chronicles. I cannot wait to see you guys in the next episode. As always, subscribe, hit that like button, and keep coding, Python crew.